to thank you so much. This room has filled up. We are 20 minutes or 15 minutes early, so I think this is a testament to how excited people are for this class. Brie Linkenhoker, who is a Stanford Master's and PhD alum, is the director of Worldview Stanford, which creates interdisciplinary learning experiences for professionals both online and on campus about the forces shaping our future. After training as a neuroscientist, she became a strategy consultant who helps companies, governments, and nonprofits navigate uncertain futures. Brie loves being married to a fellow neuroscientist. How else can you ask, did that movie make your dopamine drip? Or ponder if your cats actually do think about the future. Brie has been complimented on her publication quality brain, which has been featured in a number of research studies. Please join me in welcoming Brie Linkenhoker.
Thank you, and thank all of you for coming out. I hope we can get through the talk in here without it getting too crazy hot. Just so you know, the plan for this next hour, I'm going to fly through some overview stuff on how the brain decides, but then we're going to do the cool part of this hour. And we're going to break up into groups and head out there where you're going to meet 6 Stanford Neurosciences graduate students. They have a collection of human brains, human spinal cords, and a collection of animal brains, and they will talk to you about what you're seeing there. You can ask questions of them. They're really at the forefront of what's going on in neuroscience, so I'm really looking forward to you getting to meet all of them. So I'm just going to start with a few remarks about what we're learning about the brain and decision making. So probably many of you have seen some of these books hit the newsstands. You may have seen them at airports or in your local bookstores. The brain and the way the brain decides is a really hot topic right now. And I think it's hot for a couple of reasons. First, it's really important. We saw in 2008 and 2009 with the economic crash, with a lot of really poor decision making around mortgages and mortgage lending and all the things that fell from that. We really need to get a better handle on decision making. At the same time, there's been a real revolution in research going on in the neuroscience of decision making. And a lot of that has come from the fact that new neuroimaging technologies just in the last couple of decades have allowed us for the first time to look into the human brain while people are making decisions and find out what's going on, to be able to see inside their brain in a way that's non-invasive, that just requires them to lie in a scanner. Sometimes the techniques involve a net of electrodes over the head, but most of the time they use fMRI. You may have heard of that, functional magnetic resonance imaging. But some of these new techniques have really revolutionized what we can do with human subjects while they're making pretty much real-world decisions. So in my own postdoc in neuroeconomics, I used economic decision-making tasks to study what was going on in the brain while people were making decisions. So we had people playing stock market games for real money. Other experiments have had people making decisions about retirement investing, how much you would pay for a bag of Fritos versus a bowl of healthy fruit. There's all sorts of different variations on a theme here, but the critical thing is that we're finally able to marry the psychology of the decision making, so the behavior and the behavioral research with what's happening inside. So some of these books have captured some of the latest research, both on psychology and on the neuroscience. I'm going to talk today just about kind of the psychology side, with a few references here and there into actual brain structures, but you can ask all sorts of brain questions out there, and I'm also going to be circulating so we can talk about anything that you want to talk about. So there are 3 things I want you to take away from this talk today. The first one is that our brains are highly evolved to help us make adaptive decisions. You're going to see a bunch of animal brains out there, and I just want all of you to be thinking about the kinds of structures and functions that are common across all animals, and thinking a little bit about how our evolutionary history has shaped our brain to make decisions in the way it does today. The second thing I want you to remember is that we use all of your brain when we make decisions. How many of you have heard you only use 10% of your brain at any one time? Yeah, this is like, the myth that neuroscientists hate more than anything else. It's so not true ever in any circumstance. So we're going to talk a little bit about all the different parts of the brain that play a role in decision making. One of the things that you're going to see as we go through is that for any of these parts of the brain, whether we're talking about memory or learning or perception, we are incredibly evolved. We do really fantastic work with our brains. But sometimes the way that our brains have evolved can lead us into biases in our decision making. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go through some examples too. Okay, so a little bit on forces from our animal pasts. So next time you encounter the fries and hamburger and you're having a hard time with willpower, just say, hey, what am I supposed to do? It's millions of years of evolution, right? We evolved to like salt and fat and meat juices. It's embedded really deep. And you're actually going to see some of the places in the human brain that we know get really active when you start even thinking about French fries. So make sure you ask about that at the table. Here's another interesting feature from the past. So have a look at the faces on the top versus the faces on the bottom. And just do a really quick gut check. For the man's face, how many of you think the face on the top is more attractive than the bottom? How many of you think the bottom one is more attractive than the top? Right. So what's going on here is that the top faces are the real faces, and the bottom faces have been digitally redone to make them more symmetrical. We have an incredible preference for symmetry, and that is true for barn owls. It's true for all kinds of different mammals. It may well be true for insects. We don't know yet. Where this comes from is the fact that we have evolved these preferences for features that tell us something about the genetic fitness of other individuals that we might decide to mate with. So this is leftover, and it's common across the entire animal kingdom. Well, I shouldn't say the entire animal kingdom, much of the animal kingdom. Another force from our animal past comes in the form of paying attention to streaks. Have any of you heard of the hot hand phenomenon? Or have any of you ever been in a casino and you kind of feel like you're on a roll with getting either the cards to come your way or the slots to go your way? We know that humans find patterns, and we really get excited when we start to see a pattern that's either pointing us in a really good direction or in a really bad direction. And it's incredibly difficult for us to overlook those patterns. And what's interesting is that this same kind of focus on streakiness is also true in other primates. So when you ask other kinds of monkeys to make decisions, should I open this door or open this door to find the food that I like best, they will frequently go for the door that's been giving them the good stuff. Not just the most often, but just in the most recent period of time. They really like the streaks. And if you think about it, even though this can sometimes lead us astray, as it does frequently in the stock market, it could be adaptive. So if you can imagine you're living happily or maybe unhappily in your little primate troop, you discover a new food source, and people or other primates start eating it, and a couple of them are getting really, really, really sick. And in fact, now 3 of them have gotten sick, and they've all eaten that food source. It might actually be more adaptive for you to go, whoa, 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 I see a streak. And I see a streak that if I recognize it might keep me alive, even if it's maybe not the best integration of all the statistical data that's available to you. So that's just a few of the ways that our animal past shape our current decision making. I've kind of picked on some of the biases a little bit here, but I just want to reiterate that everything we do, our memory, the way we perceive, the way we weigh, even the fact that we can weigh risks and benefits comes from this incredible evolutionary history that we have. Okay, so the next thing I told you about the first things, that they're highly evolved to help us make adaptive decisions. The second thing I wanted to emphasize was that you use all of your brain when you make decisions. So this is a little image of, like if I cut my brain straight in half and then turned it this way for you guys to look at it. This is the front of the brain here. This is the back. we can see all kinds of different structures involved in decision making. So we know that to make decisions, we first have to perceive the world around us. We have to see what our options are. We have to hear whether there's a train coming down the track before we decide to cross those tracks or not. Smell is incredibly important in decision making, even when we're not aware of it. If any of you have ever been to a mall and smelled the smell of Cinnabon, they know what they're doing. So perception happens in specific regions of the cortex, the outer part of the brain. And they're in different places. So vision is in the back, audition is kind of on the side, olfaction is buried and kind of in the front a little bit. It's easier to see on the brains than it is around my head, so make sure you ask about that when you're outside looking at the brains. Another feature of decision making is reward and aversion. So reward is when you heard the introduction, what is it that makes your dopamine drip? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. We know it's heavily involved in the reward system. Reward is what we feel when we're playing a video game and we clear a level. Sometimes it's what we feel when we see somebody we don't like very much get their comeuppance. It's certainly what we feel when we bond with our children. We know that it's something we feel when we pet our animals. There are all kinds of different things that can elicit reward. Same thing with aversion. Toilets, snakes, bad smells, rotten food, a test that you haven't prepared for. All of these things activate that same system for, ooh, I really wish I didn't have to experience that. Emotion is really important in decision making. So we know that when you are hungry, when you are angry, you make faster decisions. And when you are sad, you have a harder time saying no to temptation, and you're willing to pay more for things that tempt you. So emotion plays a role, again, even when we don't fully know about it. Autonomic responses. This refers to what's going on when you've got that fight or flight response. So when you've got that surge of adrenaline that says, run from this, or stay and prepare to stand your ground. These autonomic responses live back here in very ancient structures in the brainstem. You'll be able to see those outside as well. Memory is an incredibly important data stream for our decision making. And one of the most interesting things about memory is that it's being constantly rewritten. So in a study that neuroscientist Liz Phelps and her colleagues did after 9/11, they found that they're in New York, in the week after the 9/11 attacks, they contacted thousands of New Yorkers and asked questions like, where were you when you heard this news? What was your experience? What were you feeling? All kinds of things about their holistic experience. And they followed up 3 years later. And they found that between 50 and 60% of those memories were accurate when compared to what they had reported just in the week after the experience. And what was most interesting is that people were far more accurate about where they were than about what they were feeling. And so, one of the things that we know is that every time we call up a memory, we also rewrite that memory a little bit. And over time, other cultural influences can help us rewrite those stories in different ways. Learning. How many of you know or could explain to someone who's never been on an elevator before what the rules for social interaction are on an elevator? Somebody throw a couple of them out for me. Look straight ahead. Eyes forward. What else? Move to the rear. Yeah. Keep your hands to yourself. Awesome. Right. And now, how many of you actually remember ever being taught these are the rules that you must obey when you're on the elevator? No, that we do it naturally, right? We are constantly absorbing information, whether that's social information, whether it's information that we read, or whether it's information that comes from experience. So always those inputs are available to us in our decision making. Attention. So when you're in London and you want to hail a cab, what color of vehicle do you look for? Black. And in New York? Right. Okay. So we know that we have the capacity to focus on some information and weed out other information. This is one of the biggest sources for bias in decision making, but it's also absolutely critical for us being able to make fast decisions. We know that attention is a feature of the brain that is spread out across the brain, but a lot of it depends on the frontal regions of the brain. And you'll see when you go out there, if you compare the frontal areas of the human brain to frontal areas of all the other animals, are frontal regions of the brain that are just enormous. And that's because we have so much capacity for attention, but also for executive functions. So executive functions refer to all of our capacity to plan and flexibly pursue those plans. Executive functions help us develop and use context-specific behavior. So for instance, if your cell phone goes off in your car or at your home, you might answer it. If you hear the same cell phone ring and you're at a friend's house, you probably won't answer it. So we know that we can switch behaviors and paradigms in different situations. One of the examples I always give for how important executive functions are is thinking about the colonoscopy. Because I tell you, you could not and you would not ever say, it feels like a great day for a colonoscopy, right? You have to have a higher goal in mind in order to be willing to sign yourself up for that. So no other animal in the animal kingdom would ever volunteer for a colonoscopy. You can thank your executive functions for that. And finally, sense making. We really want to make sense of the world. We tell ourselves stories that help us connect what we have learned and what we are seeing. These are some of the hardest features to identify in our decision making, but they are absolutely critical. And if you look back over the history of human interactions, you see the role of these narratives everywhere you look. You know, whether it's about how different countries are fundamentally positioned in geopolitics and, what is it that's driving their decisions. I mean, you can look in any given year for the past 30 years, there's been some deep psychological analysis of whoever the ruler of North Korea is, even though nobody ever meets him. And it's because we need a story to try to explain everything that we are seeing that doesn't quite fit together. So keep in mind that we are storytelling creatures, and that's another thing that sets us apart, and another thing that we do with this big frontal cortex that's right up here above our eyes.
So I'm going to send you out now to glove up and hold some brains. As you head out to the tables, I hope you'll remember the 3 things that I mentioned earlier. First, our brains are highly evolved to make adaptive decisions. Try to keep this evolutionary history in mind as you examine the animal brains outside. Second, we use all of our brains, way more than 10%, to make decisions. You can ask the grad students outside to show you some of the many structures in the brain that play a role in the functions we've just discussed, like memory, emotion, or planning. Third, our biases aren't flaws so much as they are the flip side of adaptations we've evolved over time. And I hope you'll be able to keep this in mind as you explore the brains outside, and maybe with a new appreciation for the brain's truly exquisite features. So thank you all very much for coming today, and enjoy the brains.